What happens when brilliance becomes a curse? When the pursuit of knowledge crosses every moral boundary imaginable? This is the story of Marcus Whitfield, a young prodigy whose exceptional intellect masked one of the most disturbing double lives in modern history. A man who was celebrated in lecture halls by day, but conducted unspeakable experiments in the shadows of night. At 19, Marcus had already earned his Ph.D. in neuroscience from one of the most prestigious universities in the country. His professors called him the most promising mind of his generation. His peers admired his revolutionary theories about consciousness and pain perception. But none of them knew what Marcus was really studying in his private laboratory. This is not just a story about a serial killer. This is about how the very qualities we celebrate, intelligence, curiosity, and dedication to science, can become weapons of unimaginable horror when stripped of humanity. It's about a young man who believed his genius gave him the right to play God with human lives. What you're about to hear will challenge everything you think you know about the relationship between brilliance and morality. Because sometimes the most dangerous monsters are the ones we invite into our classrooms and laboratories. Marcus Whitfield was born in Salem, Massachusetts, in 1995. From the moment he could speak, it was clear that he was different. While other children played with toys, 3-year-old Marcus was reading medical textbooks. By age 5, he was solving complex mathematical equations that stumped high school students. His parents, both doctors, recognized their son's extraordinary gift and did everything they could to nurture it. They hired private tutors, enrolled him in advanced programs, and pushed him to excel in ways that most children never experience. By age 12, Marcus had finished high school. At 14, he was accepted into Harvard's undergraduate program. At 16, he began his Ph.D. in neuroscience. But Marcus's childhood was not just about academic achievement. Even as a young boy, he displayed a disturbing fascination with suffering. While other children would cry when they saw injured animals, Marcus would study them with clinical detachment. He would spend hours watching nature documentaries, but only the segments showing predators hunting and killing their prey. His parents dismissed these behaviors as normal curiosity for a child interested in science. They told themselves that Marcus was simply trying to understand the world around him. They had no idea they were enabling something far more sinister. Marcus's first mentor at Harvard was Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a renowned neurobiologist who specialized in pain research. She was impressed by Marcus's analytical mind and his ability to discuss complex theories with the sophistication of someone twice his age. What she didn't notice was a strange gleam in his eyes whenever they discussed the neurological pathways of suffering. During his undergraduate years, Marcus maintained a perfect academic record while secretly conducting his own experiments. He started small, capturing mice from the university laboratories and testing their responses to various stimuli. He told himself he was advancing scientific understanding, but the truth was simpler and more terrifying. Marcus enjoyed watching things suffer. By the time he entered his Ph.D. program, Marcus had developed a sophisticated understanding of both neuroscience and human psychology. He knew how to present himself as a perfect student, respectful, curious, and dedicated to the noble pursuit of knowledge. But behind this carefully crafted facade, Marcus was planning something that would forever stain the halls of academia. His dissertation proposal was titled Neural Mechanisms of Pain Processing in Conscious Subjects. His advisors were impressed by the theoretical framework and the potential implications for pain management research. They had no idea that Marcus intended to conduct his most important experiments on human subjects who would never consent to what he had planned for them. The young genius had learned to compartmentalize his life with surgical precision. During the day, he was Dr. Marcus Whitfield, the brilliant young researcher who gave lectures to packed auditoriums and published papers in prestigious journals. But when the sun set, Marcus became something else entirely. The basement of Marcus's rented house near Harvard became his private laboratory. He had convinced his landlord that he needed the space for legitimate research, showing official-looking documents, and even getting a recommendation letter from one of his professors. What he created down there was a perfect replica of a professional neuroscience laboratory, complete with monitoring equipment, surgical tools, and restraint systems. Marcus's transition from theoretical research to hands-on experimentation began with what he called Phase 1 of his study. He started by observing homeless individuals around Boston, studying their behaviors, routines, and vulnerabilities. He told himself this was simply anthropological research, but he was actually selecting his first human test subjects. The first was a man named William Chun, a 43-year-old veteran who had been living on the streets for 2 years. Marcus approached William with a carefully rehearsed story about a paid medical study that would provide food, shelter, and compensation for voluntary participation. William, desperate for help, agreed immediately. Marcus had prepared meticulously for this moment. He had studied every aspect of pain neurology, perfected his surgical techniques on dozens of animals, and developed protocols that would allow him to maintain his subjects in a conscious state for extended periods. What he hadn't prepared for was a rush of excitement he felt when he finally had a human being completely under his control. The experiments Marcus conducted on William were methodical and thorough. He tested pain thresholds, measured neural responses to various stimuli, and documented everything with scientific precision. But the clinical language he used in his notes couldn't hide the truth. Marcus was torturing another human being and enjoying every moment of it. William survived for 6 days in Marcus's laboratory. During that time, Marcus learned more about the human pain response than any textbook had ever taught him. But more importantly, he discovered something about himself that both thrilled and terrified him. He had found his true calling. After William died, Marcus disposed of the body with the same methodical approach he applied to everything else. He had studied forensic science extensively, understanding exactly how to avoid detection. He cremated the remains in a specially constructed furnace, scattered the ashes in multiple locations, and destroyed all evidence of William's presence in his laboratory. But Marcus had made a crucial mistake. He had become addicted to the experience. Within 3 weeks, Marcus had selected his second subject, Maria Santos, a 19-year-old runaway from Providence who had been surviving on the streets of Boston for several months. Like William, she was vulnerable, desperate, and unlikely to be missed quickly. And like William, she believed Marcus when he told her about the medical study that would change her life. What do you think about what you've seen so far? Could you have recognized the warning signs that Marcus's parents and professors missed? What would you have done if you had suspected something was wrong? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Maria Santos became the subject of what Marcus called Phase 2 of his research. Having learned from his experience with William, Marcus had refined his techniques and extended the duration of his experiments. Maria survived for 2 weeks in his laboratory, during which Marcus documented her responses to increasingly sophisticated forms of torture. But Marcus's academic life continued without interruption. He presented papers at conferences, collaborated with respected researchers, and maintained his reputation as one of the most promising young scientists in his field. His ability to compartmentalize was so complete that colleagues who worked with him daily never suspected the horrors he was conducting just miles away from their own laboratories. The third victim was Thomas Wright, a 25-year-old with severe mental illness who had been failed by the healthcare system. Marcus had observed Thomas for weeks, learning his patterns and waiting for the perfect opportunity to approach him. When Marcus offered Thomas a chance to participate in a groundbreaking study on consciousness, Thomas agreed, hoping that his contribution to science might give meaning to his difficult life. With Thomas, Marcus entered Phase 3 of his research. He began testing theories about consciousness itself, using techniques that pushed the boundaries of what the human mind could endure while remaining aware. Marcus documented everything, convinced that he was making revolutionary discoveries about the nature of human experience. But Marcus's hunger was growing. Each experiment taught him something new, but it also revealed how much more there was to learn. He began planning more ambitious projects, developing theories that required larger sample sizes and longer study periods. His basement laboratory was expanded, and he began acquiring more sophisticated equipment through his university connections. The fourth victim was Rebecca Johnson, a college student from a nearby community college who had been struggling financially. Marcus approached her with an offer to participate in a sleep study that would pay enough to cover her tuition for a semester. Rebecca, desperate to continue her education, agreed immediately. Rebecca's case marked a turning point in Marcus's methodology. For the first time, he began experimenting with psychological torture alongside physical pain, testing theories about the relationship between mental and physical suffering. His documentation became even more detailed, including video recordings and real-time neural monitoring. Marcus had convinced himself that his work was advancing human understanding of consciousness and pain in ways that conventional research never could. He wrote in his private journals about the necessary sacrifices his subjects were making for the benefit of all humanity. But the truth was simpler and more horrifying. Marcus had become completely addicted to the power he held over other human beings. Thank you for staying with this video until this point. We truly appreciate your time and engagement with this difficult but important story. We assure you that the most shocking revelations are still to come, and what you'll discover in the remaining chapters will completely change how you think about this case. By his 20th birthday, Marcus had perfected what he called his research facility. The basement laboratory had grown into a sophisticated complex that rivaled any university research center. He had created separate chambers for different types of experiments, installed advanced monitoring systems, and developed protocols for maintaining subjects for extended periods. Marcus's seventh victim was David Kim, a 31-year-old immigrant who had been struggling to find work in Boston. Marcus had approached David with an offer to participate in a cognitive enhancement study, promising payment and potential networking opportunities. David, hoping to improve his prospects in his new country, eagerly accepted. With David, Marcus began what he called the Consciousness Project, a series of experiments designed to map the complete neural pathways of human awareness during extreme stress. Marcus had developed techniques for maintaining his subjects at the precise edge between consciousness and unconsciousness, allowing him to explore questions that no ethical researcher could ever investigate. The laboratory itself was a masterpiece of planning and engineering. Marcus had soundproofed every surface, installed independent ventilation systems, and created multiple disposal methods for organic waste. He had even constructed a small crematorium disguised as a furnace for metalworking, where he could eliminate all physical evidence of his experiments. But Marcus's most disturbing creation was his documentation system. He had recorded hundreds of hours of video, written thousands of pages of research notes, and created detailed maps of human neural responses to various forms of suffering. In his twisted mind, he was building the most comprehensive database of human pain ever assembled. Marcus's eighth victim was Jennifer Walsh, a 24-year-old graduate student in psychology who had responded to one of Marcus's carefully placed advertisements for research participants. Jennifer was intelligent and curious about neuroscience, making her the perfect subject for Marcus's most advanced experiments. With Jennifer, Marcus tested his theories about the relationship between intellectual capacity and pain tolerance. He subjected her to increasingly complex psychological challenges while monitoring her neural responses to physical stimuli. His documentation of Jennifer's case filled 3 entire volumes and included detailed analyses of how her academic background influenced her responses to his experiments. But Marcus had begun to make mistakes. His confidence in his own brilliance had made him careless about certain details. He had started taking greater risks, keeping subjects for longer periods, and conducting experiments that required more resources than he could easily acquire without raising suspicions. The ninth victim, Robert Chun, was a 40-year-old accountant who had volunteered for what he believed was a study on financial decision-making under stress. Marcus had maintained his cover story perfectly, even creating fake university documentation and reference materials. But Robert's disappearance was different from the others. He had family members who immediately began searching for him when he failed to return home. Marcus's laboratory had become his entire world. He spent 18 hours a day conducting experiments, documenting results and planning future research. He had stopped attending most of his university obligations, using illness and family emergencies as excuses for his absences. His professors and colleagues were concerned about his sudden withdrawal, but they attributed it to the pressure of completing his dissertation. The laboratory contained the remains of 9 human beings and evidence of experiments that violated every principle of medical ethics ever established. But in Marcus's mind, he had created something revolutionary, a complete understanding of human consciousness that would transform neuroscience forever. He had no idea that his carefully constructed world was about to collapse around him. Marcus's downfall began with a single mistake that his brilliant mind had somehow overlooked. Robert Chen's disappearance had triggered a police investigation, and detectives had begun retracing Robert's last known activities. Security footage from a coffee shop near Harvard showed Robert meeting with a young man who matched Marcus's description. Detective Sarah Morrison had been investigating missing persons cases around Boston for 3 years, and she had noticed a pattern that troubled her deeply. 9 people had disappeared over the past 18 months, all of them vulnerable individuals who had been approached by someone offering participation in medical research. The descriptions of this mysterious researcher were remarkably consistent, and they all pointed to someone connected to Harvard's neuroscience program. When Detective Morrison requested access to Harvard's research records, she discovered that Marcus Whitfield had been conducting unsupervised research using human subjects, something that was strictly prohibited without institutional approval. His professors confirmed that Marcus had requested unusual equipment and materials, always with plausible explanations that had seemed legitimate at the time. The search warrant for Marcus's residence was executed at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday in October. What police found in the basement laboratory exceeded their worst expectations. The evidence of Marcus's crimes was overwhelming and meticulously documented. His video recordings, research notes, and physical evidence painted a picture of systematic torture that had been conducted with scientific precision. Marcus was arrested without resistance. When Detective Morrison informed him of the charges against him, he simply asked that the police had preserved his research materials intact. Even facing multiple murder charges, Marcus was more concerned about his scientific contributions than the lives he had destroyed. The trial of Marcus Whitfield became one of the most closely watched criminal cases in Massachusetts history. Psychiatrists who evaluated him described a brilliant mind that had become completely detached from human empathy. Marcus showed no remorse for his victims, referring to them consistently as research subjects and describing their suffering as necessary data collection. The evidence presented at trial included portions of Marcus's documentation, though much of it was considered too disturbing to show in open court. Jurors who viewed the complete materials required psychological counseling after the trial ended. The judge described Marcus's crimes as the most systematic and calculated acts of human cruelty he had encountered in 30 years on the bench. Marcus was convicted on 9 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to 9 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. During his sentencing statement, he expressed no remorse for his victims but complained that his research would never be completed. He told the court that future scientists would eventually vindicate his methods and recognize his contributions to human knowledge. The impact on Harvard's neuroscience department was immediate and devastating. Several professors resigned in shame. The research program was completely restructured, and new oversight protocols were implemented to prevent any similar violations. The university paid millions of dollars in settlements to the families of Marcus's victims and funded a new center for research ethics in his victims' memory. But perhaps the most disturbing legacy of Marcus Whitfield's crimes was what his research had actually revealed. Despite the unconscionable methods he had used, some of his discoveries about pain processing and consciousness were scientifically valid. The ethical research community faced the impossible question of whether knowledge gained through torture could ever be used for beneficial purposes. Marcus remains in prison today, where he continues to write about neuroscience and consciousness. He has never expressed remorse for his crimes and continues to believe that his research was justified by its potential scientific value. Prison psychologists describe him as one of the most dangerous individuals they have ever evaluated, not because of his capacity for violence, but because of his complete inability to recognize the humanity of other people. The story of Marcus Whitfield forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about the relationship between intelligence and morality. How do we identify and prevent the corruption of brilliant minds before they cause irreparable harm? What are the warning signs that parents, teachers, and colleagues should watch for when genius becomes dangerous? Marcus's case led to fundamental changes in how research institutions monitor their students and faculty. New protocols require multiple levels of oversight for any research involving human subjects, and universities now provide mandatory training on research ethics for all advanced students. But perhaps most importantly, Marcus Whitfield's crimes remind us that intelligence without empathy is not genius. It's a form of intellectual pathology that poses a threat to society itself. The pursuit of knowledge must always be balanced with respect for human dignity and the fundamental value of every life. What do you think about the ethical questions raised by this case? How can we better identify and prevent the corruption of brilliant minds before they cause harm? Should Marcus's research findings ever be used for beneficial purposes, or should they be buried forever? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story has affected you as deeply as it has affected us, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell for more true stories that explore the darkest corners of human nature. Your support helps us continue bringing these important but difficult stories to light. And don't miss our next video, The Professor Who Disappeared, When Brilliance Becomes Madness, another shocking true story about the dangerous intersection of genius and mental illness. Click the screen now to watch it immediately.